week's episode of Three True Values. This is a Tuesday edition of the show. As you know, that generally means this would be a mailbag episode, but we have an NCAA tournament bracket. We have 68 teams seeded throughout the field. That's right, March Madness is here. The NCAA tournament is upon us, so we have a lot to discuss. We're going to get to each of the brackets here. Each region we will discuss in depth, one segment at a time, 4 segments today. We will start in the South region. We will then move to the West region, give you all the way through the Final Four, some kind of picks, some kind of analysis. Then flip over to the other side. We will go through the East in the top right corner of the bracket and then discuss the Midwest and the other side of the Final Four, give you an early national champion pick in that final segment. So we've got a lot to get to, a lot to discuss. Do want to just right off the top briefly mention bracketology. My bracket goes 67 for 68. Xavier, I did not have in the field, had them as the first team out, but did have West Virginia making it in the last 4 in. They do not get in. Texas, Xavier, and then, of course, we end up with North Carolina, controversially in the field, playing San Diego State. So we will talk about those matchups. We will talk about everything else. We might get a little bit more into bracketology, what went into it, the controversy surrounding North Carolina being in the field on Thursday's show, which will be here as normally programmed. We will get it out early in the day, possibly before those noon tip-offs. Might be right at noon as we normally do publish it, but we'll have more content, more prep for you over the course of the weekend, not only here on the podcast, but over at On3 as well. I believe today will be the top 10 players in each region. If you want to know the best players, the players you need to watch out for in each quadrant here, we will have that for you in each corner of the bracket. You can read about all of those players just shortly here on the website. And then tomorrow, going to be breaking down the cleanest paths. And I know that is a little bit of a strange term because the bracket is going to move and shift. We'll talk about that here in a second, but we'll talk about the 8 teams that have the best path towards the Final Four as things start before we see any of the chaos unfold. And already up is my bracket picks. We'll be going through that here on today's show, though. So without any further ado, let's go ahead. Let's get into it. Let's talk about this South region. We have plenty to unpack here. Auburn gets the number 1 overall seed, as we all promised they would, despite losing 3 of their last 4 games. And I know that is a tough pill for some people to swallow. They don't understand how can their recent form not go into this. Well, it is the complete body of work. It is the overall resume that the selection committee is taking into account. Auburn, of course, will take on the winner of Alabama State and St. Francis. So this is going to be our first pick here. In that first 4 game, I would lean here on Tuesday night towards St. Francis, but don't be surprised. You might go Alabama State here. I'm really up in the air on this matchup. Of course, Alabama State 19 and 15 overall, but their computer metrics do not show very positive things. St. Francis, same situation, but they are 16 and 17 overall. So if you're going with the team with a better record, you would lean Alabama State. No wrong answer in this one. I think it could be pretty close. At least that's what the computers tell us when you look in that area. Of course, the winner of that will play against Auburn. We're rolling with Auburn here. Should not be much of an issue. I know they've lost some games recently, but not to anyone who is this level of competition. Just below them in the Lexington region, we have got Louisville taking on Creighton. Could be a really interesting matchup. Louisville's best player, Chucky Hepburn, he is a great perimeter defender. He gets his buckets, of course, as a guard playing out on the outside of the offense. Creighton, on the other hand, led by Ryan Kalkbrenner, he's going to do his damage on the interior, So this is one of the matchups where the best player on either team will not be able to cancel each other out. They could both get theirs. It could make for a fun basketball game. I am leaning towards Louisville because they have gotten hot a little bit recently. They've looked good, even though it was against the ACC, which we know has been a bit down this season. In Denver, we have got the 5 seed Michigan taking on UC San Diego. UC San Diego has been one of my favorite teams here in recent weeks, recent months, really, to follow. They have been an incredible story. They have got a really good team. Tate Jones is a very good player who leads them in a lot of categories. I'm just going to lean Michigan here. I think that UC San Diego got done, maybe not dirty because they end up with a 12 seed, that famous 5-12 matchup. But facing Michigan is tough here because I do think that Michigan is a bit, just a little bit underseeded. They win the Big Ten championship. And so for a conference champion of one of the 2 or 3 best leagues across college basketball to end up with a 5 seed seems a little bit low. And it just feels like this Michigan team might be able to pull this one out as long as they can limit the turnovers. That's been the key for Michigan all season, and UC San Diego could make that happen. Then we go to the bottom of that pod there. Texas A&M against Yale. I have Texas A&M pretty easily here. Could be a good game. Yale always shows up in the NCAA tournament. There's no question about that. But Texas A&M is one of the best offensive rebounding teams in the country. You play that style of basketball against a team that is a little bit smaller, you usually are going to have success. So I'm rolling with Texas A&M there. We move now to Milwaukee, where Ole Miss will play the winner of San Diego State and North Carolina. So we have another game to break down before we get to that Ole Miss matchup. San Diego State and North Carolina is going to be really good, I think. San Diego State, a very good defensive team. They've got Miles Bird. They've got Guath in the middle, their center prospect, who has garnered some interest in the future, at least, as a potential NBA guy. So plenty to like on this San Diego State team. But North Carolina, I think, comes in with a little different energy. Everyone is talking about you don't belong here. Everyone is saying that it was the wrong decision, and you're feeling that. And I think that this North Carolina team has looked much better in recent weeks. We saw it in their computer numbers. They started to move up the board. They were stringing together wins. And yes, they were against a little bit lower level of competition. But again, San Diego State is an 11 seed in this tournament. So they are not exactly considered an elite type of team. So I know that North Carolina has struggled against the best of the best. I am rolling with North Carolina in this play-in game to make it through and get to the first round of the NCAA tournament. They ride that little bit of momentum, and can't forget, they are a very talented team. They were at one time considered one of the 10 to 20 best teams in college basketball as we prepared for the season. So North Carolina faces off then against Ole Miss, and I think I'm going to just ride with North Carolina. I think if they can start to build some momentum, this is a team that is still dangerous, and this Ole Miss team has struggled to string together consistent results, at least recently here. So I am going to go with North Carolina to pull off that upset. Would be an interesting one to watch there because we look at 14 SEC teams in the field. How does the narrative start to shape if we end up dropping 1 or 2 of them here in the first round to lower seeded teams? We look at the bottom of this Milwaukee pod here, though, and we have Iowa State taking on Lipscomb. I know that Iowa State is dealing with the Keyshawn Gilbert injury, but they've been playing without Gilbert for a couple of weeks now. Don't have any concerns with them handling Lipscomb. We get to Cleveland, where Marquette will play New Mexico. Marquette has been in a little bit of a free slide here. They have not looked like the same team that they were early on in this season. So they are not clicking on all cylinders. A New Mexico team who has been excellent. They have not been perfect through the Mountain West schedule, but they did win the regular season conference crown. I think that means something. This is a really good Mountain West conference. They've got Donovan Dent. Donovan Dent versus Cam Jones is going to be an excellent matchup. I am just rolling with New Mexico here. I think they will be able to get through to the second round to face Michigan State, who I am picking over Bryant. Now, I've said this a couple times now. I am not picking against Michigan State here. I would not pick against Michigan State. I think Michigan State has a better chance of going to the Final Four than they do to be stopped in the round of 64. However, if you were determined, you absolutely said, I will be projecting one of either the 16 or 15 seeds to pull out a win in this NCAA tournament. If you tell me that is the case, which one should you pick? Bryant is a team that gets up a high volume of 3-point shots. They knock down their 3-pointers at a high rate, and they've got some athletes who have come from a higher level of competition to play at Bryant, versus a Michigan State team which struggles incredibly to shoot from the perimeter. So that can always be a formula for an upset there. I don't think it will be. However, I think Michigan State's a little bit too good on defense. I think that they've got too many other things going for them in this matchup. So we now move on to the round of 32, the second round, the end of this weekend here, where we have Auburn against Louisville. And I think this is where it gets interesting for Auburn. This is where we will start to learn whether they are the Auburn that we saw all season, or if that 3 out of 4 game losing streak was something seriously concerning, something that we need to be on the radar. Even if they squeak out a win against Louisville, I think it is a major red flag for them entering the next weekend of games. If they go in and handle business, if they take care of Louisville and it looks like a blowout, it looks like Auburn controls it from start to finish, I think we can start to pencil in, potentially even write it in pen, that Auburn will make a Final Four appearance. So this is going to be the key date. And I know when you're filling out your bracket, it doesn't really benefit you to have a second round game where we're starting to learn about a team, or at least confirm what we know about a team. But that's what I'm looking at here. That's what I think. If you're in one of those pools where you reset your picks after each round, that's something to watch out for sure. We look, though, at the bottom of that little section of the bracket in Denver again. We've got Michigan taking on Texas A&M, and I think I just barely lean Texas A&M here. It will be very fascinating, because where I said that Texas A&M getting out on the offensive boards would be a big advantage against the likes of Yale, I think that it is going to be the story of the game against Michigan. Michigan with 2 7-footers out there. How much is Texas A&M able to continue to do what they want to do? There's big bodies out there in the way of them accomplishing their goal. I'm just barely leaning towards them over Michigan, but that one I think is razor thin margins over there. Towards the bottom of the bracket, we of course have Iowa State, and I've got North Carolina here. I think North Carolina probably just runs out of luck. I'm rolling with Iowa State in that one, even with the Keyshawn Gilbert injury. Like I said, they've played without him for a little while now. I think they've started to get used to what the hierarchy is without him on the floor. New Mexico against Michigan State. Again, Michigan State not getting the easiest draw here, but they do face a 10 seed. They're a 2 seed. I think that Jace Richardson has emerged enough that this team is rolling and will continue to roll through to that next round and get to Atlanta, where we talk about the South Regional now, the Sweet 16 round, where Auburn would face Texas A&M. And this is where and why that Louisville matchup will be so important in gauging what Auburn is able to do. If they are able to blow them out, I think you easily take Auburn here. You say, okay, that game that they played against Texas A&M during the SEC tournament, that was because they weren't playing for much. That was because they had a different mindset. They didn't need it the way that Texas A&M went out there and felt like they needed it. So you would then roll with Auburn. If things get dicey, if it doesn't look good for Auburn, they just survived that game, I think you roll Texas A&M here and say Texas A&M had their number. Auburn clearly is not playing at that high level that they were before, and you take your chances with the upset pick here. But I'm going to roll with Auburn for now, because I do believe there is something. I don't quite know what it is. It could be many different things that we're talking about when we talk about Auburn going through that losing streak. Maybe a loss of focus, maybe having everything locked up, maybe preserving themselves. Whatever the case was, I have just this sneaking suspicion they're going to get things pointed back in the right direction. Will they ever be the full dominant? I don't know, but I think they can get past Texas A&M here as well. And to the bottom of that bracket, of course, in Atlanta, we would see Iowa State taking on Michigan State, where I do think that after this many games into the tournament, you play 3 games without one of your top scorers. I think it starts to catch up with you. I think that Michigan State, as long as they are healthy, they have their rotation figured out. They have got all those things clicking. And I think that I would just lean Michigan State to go ahead and make it into that Elite Eight round. And so we have one more game in the South region before we place somebody there into the Final Four, and it is Auburn against Michigan State. A little bit of chalk, 1 versus 2, but we're going to lean Auburn here again because, again, if they make it through that Texas A&M game, if we see them survive that, I think that that is a good indication that they are up and rolling, that they are starting to taste that Final Four appearance, that they're starting to feel like they can be that national championship team. And so I'm picking them to advance to the Final Four. When we come back on the other side, we will go through the bottom of this left side of the bracket. We will talk about the West region. We'll talk about Florida and everyone else in that section of the NCAA tournament. Stay right here where we have plenty more March Madness content for you on 3 True Values. Welcome back. As we continue to roll through this bracket, we are talking about the West region, where Florida is the number 1 seed, of course, the 4th number 1 seed, despite winning the SEC championship. I said during the last stages of bracketology that whoever it was that won the SEC title would likely be in this last 1 seed spot. That plays out with Florida winning it, and they play Norfolk State. And so I think you can pretty safely roll with Florida to get through that one. We then look there in that Raleigh pod where UConn and Oklahoma will take on one another in that 8-9 matchup. I'm just rolling with UConn here. I think that when Liam McNeely has been playing well, when he has been healthy, this UConn team looks a lot better than it has in other circumstances. And so I will roll with UConn to win that one. Jeremiah Fears, of course, for Oklahoma could very well get a win here and assert himself. I think that he has everything it takes to be a March Madness star. It's just been the consistency throughout the year. He has struggled when there has been a rise in competition, a rise in the level each time throughout this season. This is another step up. You're going to have a big leap when you see that NCAA tournament level of competition. And so while I don't think UConn is perfect by any means, I'm just going to lean with them over Oklahoma here. As we move to Seattle, we have Memphis against Colorado State. And this is one I want to spend just a little bit of time on because, first off, for Memphis, you get the higher seed than you were expecting. Should be celebrating that. But then you end up in a 5-12 matchup and you think, oh, no. And then you see who you drew and you think, what did we do to deserve this? Because Memphis is a team that I think was certainly a dark horse to make an Elite Eight Final Four type of run. You look at what they have with PJ Haggerty, with Dane Danger, Tyrese Hunter, who is now injured, and that is going to play a key piece in the analysis of this matchup. You think of yourself as a team that can make a deep run, and you still can. They still can here. But in the first round, having to go up against Colorado State is just brutal. Nick Clifford has been one of the best players in college basketball, potentially the best over the last few weeks. He is more responsible for his team's success than anyone, according to a lot of the analytic data. He goes out there and he performs on both ends of the floor. He puts up big offensive numbers. He is a good perimeter defender. He has been able to do it at all levels this year. He is shooting the 3 well. He gets to the rim a lot. And so this is a very dangerous team. Colorado State mowed through the Mountain West with ease through the last couple of months of the season. You look at them, they're one of the hottest teams in college basketball. They're on a big winning streak. They continue to string together results. I mean, it is big what they have been able to put together. And you look at a Memphis team that is now without one of their top 3 players. Tyrese Hunter, I do not see being able to strap it up and play, certainly not able to be near 100% by the time that first round matchup takes place. So it is very unfortunate for Memphis here, but I am going to just lean Colorado State. I do think whichever of these two teams gets the win, I think is a very lively pick in the second round, which we will talk about here shortly, because Maryland is the other team here facing off against Grand Canyon. Maryland, the Crab Five. They've got that starting lineup. They have been incredible all season. Derek Queen, of course, an NBA draft prospect, should be in the lottery this time here in a few months, but they don't have a ton of depth, so they cannot afford any injuries. This Maryland team has got to keep their starting five on the floor for as long as they can throughout the tournament. This Grand Canyon team, of course, coached by Bryce Drew, has been one of the mid-major stories over the past couple of years. They've got a very good player who is able to score from the wing. He's done it in a lot of ways. He's a veteran player. And now when I look at this matchup, I just have to lean with the overall talent. I think that starting five is just too good. I know that this is going to be one of the upset picks that a lot of people make, that a lot of people discuss, but it's the Crab Five, so you got to have them advancing through this one. In Wichita, we've got Missouri taking on Drake. And man, is this one of the best games that we're going to see in the opening weekend. Missouri has been a very good team. They have knocked off some of the best teams in the SEC throughout the course of the season, but has not always been the most consistent. And I think that's the key here with some of these SEC teams that are seated a little bit lower. Yes, they have good results. Yes, they are a very good team, but they haven't always gone out and shown it every night over and over again. And so I'm leaning towards Drake, who is a 30-win mid-major team, a team that has just mowed through its competition time after time after time. They've got so many reps. They've got a great coach in McCollum. They've got Bennett Sturts, who is not just a D2 player. I know that that's the narrative around this Drake team, is that they piece together a bunch of D2 players and look at the sum of all these parts, look at how good they have been. That is not necessarily what Bennett Sturts is anymore. He is a guy who has gone from D2 to now being on NBA radars. People are discussing him. People are talking about, whether it's this year or in the future, the potential that he could be playing at the highest level sometime soon. So do not think of this player as somebody who is just going to get wiped off the floor when he faces a higher level of competition. That is not going to happen. I am leaning towards Drake there. In the bottom part of that pod, we've got Texas Tech against UNC Wilmington. Going to ride with Texas Tech here. I know Darian Williams still not 100%, but JT Toppin is one of the best bigs in college basketball. He is very talented. He's going to put up big numbers in that matchup, I believe. And, of course, the guard play around him is solid. It's really solid. I like this Texas Tech team a lot. In Providence, we have Kansas taking on Arkansas. So Bill Self versus John Calipari. And all of that in this big-time coaching matchup is setting the table for one of them to get the opportunity to play against Rick Pitino. So this is the area. You know, we talk about coaches being the stars in college basketball. A lot of times they are the biggest names in many of these matchups. We have the biggest names possible here in this pod in Providence. We've got Bill Self and his team that has had plenty of ups and downs, preseason number one, so we know that they've got talent, against John Calipari's team, which vastly underperformed early in the season, got things together enough to now be in the NCAA tournament field. They, again, were a preseason top 25 team. What do you do with this matchup? I think that ultimately where I lean, and it's interesting, I'm going to lean towards where the injury news is telling us. And the injury news is telling us that Arkansas is getting back Boogie Fland. They could be without a Dutiero, but they would get back Boogie Fland. And I think that might hurt Arkansas. And here's why. Early in the season, when Arkansas was going through these struggles, when they did not look like a top 25 team, they did not look like an NCAA tournament team, one of the major issues that they were facing was the fact that Boogie Fland and John L. Davis just had not learned how to coexist on the floor, how to mesh their two styles of play, the things that they do well. Well, now you've got John L. Davis. He's starting to get rolling. He has not looked like he was last year, but he has looked much better. And now you're going to reintroduce Boogie Flan off of an injury. So there has not been any integration of the two. There's been no further learning of how to play together. And they're going to go out there in the NCAA tournament and just try to figure it out. Not a fan of that. It's unfortunate because I do think that Boogie Flan is such a good basketball player that I would not. I'm not saying that I would just not play him, but it's a really tough spot to be trying to introduce things that already did not work earlier in the season. And so I would lean towards Kansas, who has looked good, not great through this back portion of the season. They've at least got some things figured out. It seems they're playing a lot more through Hunter Dickinson, and that has benefited them greatly. We move to the second round here, and we've got Florida taking on UConn. I think Florida, again, just rolls through that one. This Florida team is a juggernaut. They have got it all. They have got the top-end talent in Walter Clayton, in Elijah Martin, in Alex Condon. You've got the role players in Will Richard, Thomas Houck. You've got so much out there. Ruben Chinyelu, Micah Hanlogton. You've got so much depth that they can just roll in and out players at just about every position. And that is big this time of year. So I think Florida rolls through that one. An inconsistent UConn team sees their season come to an end there. I've got Colorado State against Maryland. I'm just barely going to lean Maryland, and that's if they can stay healthy. Of course, that is the big caveat with Maryland. If at any point, like I said in the previous bracket, obviously it doesn't help you if you're filling it out just today, start to finish. But if you're in one of these bracket pools where you reset the picks after each round, be wary of Maryland's health status. That is going to be the biggest factor in how deep of a run they make. Rolling with Maryland here, though, assuming health. In the Wichita region, we have got Drake taking on Texas Tech, and I do just lean Texas Tech. Like I said, I like this roster. I think that they're a good, talented group of players, and I think that they're just a little bit higher level of athlete as we get into it than Drake. I think that they will be able to just overwhelm this group enough, with JT Toppin leading the way there. In the Providence region, we've got St. John's now taking on Kansas, and I am rolling with St. John's. I think Rick Pitino has this group vast. They are so severely underrated, and I know that they have their position in the AP poll. They get a 2 seed here, but I don't think that college basketball fans, college basketball analysts are talking quite enough about this St. John's team, about how good they have been and the run that they could potentially make here. I mean, they absolutely just laid waste to the Big East for much of this year. They dominated that conference, and it is not, that conference is not at the peak of its powers right now, but it is a good conference, and they had no issues going through it. So now we end up with Florida against Maryland. And again, I think that while this Maryland starting five is one of the best in the country, I think Florida's is right up there, if not better than it's just about equal with Maryland's. And you add in that depth, I think you've got to roll with Florida in that one. And then on the bottom part of the bracket, we end up with St. John's against Texas Tech, and I think it's going to be an interesting one. I think JT Toppin versus Zuby Ejiofor will be pretty electric. Darian Williams, if he can get to full health, or at least close to full health, if he can play in this matchup and make a difference, if he could match up against RJ Luis, I think that this would be one of the most fun matchups we could find. I think it'd be real 50-50, but I'm leaning towards St. John's. As I said, I just think that they have been on another level recently. And now, in this Elite Eight matchup here in the West Regional in San Francisco, we've got Florida against St. John's in San Francisco. So obviously not ideal in how the bracket is laid out and how this all plays out, but we're going to lean towards picking Florida here. I just think, like I said before, juggernaut is the word that I would use to describe them, setting up Florida against Auburn in the Final Four. So we have an all SEC left side of the bracket here, and it leaves us needing to pick someone to advance to the national championship. I am going for Florida here, and here is why. Yes, I talked about in that first segment, Auburn. I think if they reach this point, it is a definite sign that they are back to full force. They are back to what they were. But while they were at full force, the one team that got them was Florida playing in Auburn. Florida can get up for these biggest games. Florida is currently playing at a higher level entering the NCAA tournament. Florida has more depth. I think that this Florida team is a better basketball team in that spot than Auburn. Now, Auburn got clicking earlier. They got their resume put together earlier. They had a better overall resume. But Florida is the team that is playing the best right now. So I'm going with Florida over Auburn there in the Final Four. When we come back on the other side, we will talk about the right side of this bracket. We've got Duke. We've got Houston. Can anyone upset them on the way to the Final Four? We'll talk about it right here on Three True Values. Welcome back in to Three True Values as we keep rolling through the bracket. Here we have the East region of the number 2 overall seed, Duke, who will face the winner of American and Mount St. Mary's. So we have a game to discuss before we get to this Duke matchup. Let's pick American in this one. Both teams 22-12 entering this Wednesday play-in game, but we are going to lean towards picking American out of the Patriot League. They were the team that was at the top of their conference all season versus Mount St. Mary's, who had to make a run through their conference tournament to reach the NCAA tournament. So we're going to just lean American in that one, and then we're going to go with Duke. Does not matter if Cooper Flagg plays in this one or not. Duke should take care of business pretty easily in order to advance to the round of 32. We then talk about Mississippi State and Baylor. I think this is a very interesting matchup because I look at this one and I say, this is going to come down to the best college basketball player on the floor and the best future NBA player on the floor. Josh Hubbard is the best college basketball player that will be out on the floor in that matchup. He, of course, is the point guard for Mississippi State, an undersized guy, doesn't really have many prospects to play at the NBA level, at least, could play professionally in other areas, but his size is going to set him back. It does not set him back in college basketball, though, where he creates separation, where he puts up big offensive numbers. VJ Edgecombe, on the other end, is definitely projected to be the best pro in this game. He has strung together results. He has looked incredible in some matchups, but his consistency has continued to be something that he is trying to work out. He has not fully found his rhythm throughout the course of the season. So do you rely on the most talented player on the floor, the guy who's going to be the best player long term, to get it figured out in the NCAA tournament, or do you go with the guy who is a proven entity in Josh Hubbard? I'm just leaning towards Josh Hubbard there, so I'm going to roll with Mississippi State in this matchup. We then go to Seattle, where Oregon takes on Liberty, and Liberty is going to be another popular one. We've got the 5-12 matchup, but Dana Altman, Oregon tend to do pretty well in the first round of the NCAA tournament if you go look through history. So I am rolling with Oregon in this one. I think that they're obviously the more talented roster. I think they're also a little bit deeper of a roster. I think they've got more going for them into this matchup than Liberty. So I'm just going to go Oregon there, but like I said, plenty of people are going to lean the other way. I will go Arizona over Akron. I know that Akron was a one-loss team in the MAC. They had an excellent season, but this Arizona team, I think, is a little bit underrated coming into the tournament. Just a little bit. You look at Caleb Love, and yes, he is as streaky as it gets, has been all throughout his college basketball career, but he also puts up big numbers in big moments a decent enough percentage of the time that you kind of don't want to just pick against him. I think that Caleb Love, this is the type of spot where he shines. I think that this is where he gets it done, and he's surrounded by plenty of other guys who are contributing. I think that, most among them is Carter Bryant, who is going to be a future NBA player. He came in as this 5-star guy, and a lot of people were disappointed earlier in the year when he did not kind of just take over in a big role, an offensive output. That's not what he has been. It might not be what he is, but what he is an excellent role player. He does all the little things. He plays defense hard. He gets back. He fills lanes. He just moves the ball, rebounds. He does a little bit of everything. And I think that is extremely valuable. And impressive that a freshman, a 5-star freshman, comes in and accepts a role like that, has the understanding that this is what's best for the team. I think that is huge for somebody that young to take on that kind of role. And so I'm a big fan of his. As we move to the Denver region here at the bottom of the bracket, we have maybe the right along with Memphis and Colorado State that we talked about in the last segment. This is one of the saddest first round matchups that we're going to get because we can't advance both of them. We want both of them into the next round of the NCAA tournament, but we can't get it. BYU and VCU. I'm telling you, I think I might have picked BYU over any of the other 11 seeds. I think I might have picked VCU over just about any of the other 6 seeds. Probably would have, as I look at the bracket here. But we're now looking at a matchup where they're going up against each other. So what do you do? It's tough. It really is tough. I'm going to lean BYU here because they're the higher seed, because they've come from the bigger conference, because they have been on a roll here recently. Richie Saunders has been incredible. I think if you can get, it doesn't have to be the best version of it, but you need to get Yegor Dimon clicking here if you're going to make a deep NCAA tournament run for BYU. That's going to be the key to watch here. But for VCU, Max Shulga is must watch. You're going to want to check him out. He is probably their best player, potentially on both ends of the floor at VCU. He is an NBA draft prospect. He is somebody who is on radars for sure, could end up playing in the league next season. And then we look at the bottom of that bracket, and it gets even worse because you have Wisconsin facing Montana, and you think, well, I just had to sweat out which of these two teams I was going to advance. And now I look at a potential second round matchup against Wisconsin, who I also wanted to have go a little bit deeper in the tournament. So what do you do here? Now I'm picking Wisconsin over Montana. It will set up that second round matchup that we'll talk about here in a second. But a quick fact on Montana: ranks highest among all teams in the NCAA tournament field in KenPom's luck metric. Now, that has not been a good sign for teams in recent memory. I can't remember the exact number of years, but over the last several years, the team who ranked highest in luck among the NCAA tournament field lost in the first round most of the time. So, not a good sign for Montana. Now, St. Mary's against Vanderbilt. This is an interesting matchup because St. Mary's, of course, Augustus Marshallonis, Mitchell Saxon leading that group, had an excellent year in the West Coast Conference, but they lose to Gonzaga in the championship after sweeping the regular season series. Vanderbilt is a team that has gotten up for big games and has surprised quite a few teams. And I think that's where I lean Vanderbilt in this one. I think that they might just be able to get up. They've got those scrappy guards. It's a really pieced together team, but that has found a camaraderie, a unity there. And so I'm just going to lean Vanderbilt over St. Mary's, but I would not be surprised if it went the other way around. Alabama should roll against Robert Morris and send us into the second round here, where we can talk about Duke and Mississippi State. This is where they need to get Cooper Flagg healthy for. And I know there's been discussion. Do you sit him? Do you play him? That's obviously a doctor discussion. I think that as long as his ankle is fine, you've got to play him at minimum by this game here. You have got to have him ready to go. You face an SEC foe. I think that this is where you need a Cooper Flagg performance. And if you get it, I think you roll through pretty safely against Mississippi State. Oregon against Arizona. Now here is a fun matchup, a former Pac-12 showdown between these two. Arizona, I think behind Caleb Love, I think behind KJ Lewis, I think the depth of their options at the top of the roster. Now, they don't necessarily have depth in the sense of going 9-10 deep. Of course, injuries have set that back quite a bit. But I do think that if Oregon tries to take away one thing, if they try to take away Caleb Love, I think that Arizona has enough outside of that to get the job done there. So I'm going to lean Arizona. We have BYU against Wisconsin. Again, this is the section of the bracket. This is the pod that is just so brutal. Like, we want all of them to advance. I wish all three of these teams could have advanced through this round, but they can't because they all have to play each other. So we're going to go with Wisconsin just edging out BYU because we have not seen that consistency from Yegor Dimon. Talked about it just a minute ago. I think he is the difference here. They've got a really solid floor that Richie Saunders, that the rest of that group, Kibikita, all those players provide them. But can Yegor Dimon hit that next stride? Can he reach a new level? Can he find that play that he had at the very beginning of this college basketball season? We will see. Then here at the bottom of the bracket, we've got Alabama against Vanderbilt. And we will roll with Alabama, a familiar foe, somebody that they've already beaten this season. I think that they take care of business there. So we see Duke and Arizona. Now, this is where it gets interesting. This is where you definitely need Cooper Flagg to be healthy because Caleb Love has lived for these moments. Like, this is the game where he inevitably goes for 27 points. And at the end of the game, he's going to get a shot and he's either going to make it or he's going to miss it. And that's going to be part of the story of Caleb Love, is he's going to take the biggest shot. Will it go down? And it has gone down a number of times throughout his career, and he's also missed it a few times throughout his career. So this is going to be a big matchup. I think that this one could very well come down to the wire, but I lean Duke in this one with Cooper Flagg down the stretch. Wisconsin against Alabama. I am going to go with Wisconsin. I am leaning with them there because I do think that John Tonje has a big game. I think that Blackwell has been excellent for them. I think that they've got the centers to match up with some of Alabama's bigs. And I think that Alabama has had a bit of variance in their game this season, especially in some of these big games. And they haven't fully gotten things to click at all times. Now, their highs have been incredibly high. They're a team that could easily beat Wisconsin by 15, 20 points, the same way that they have to some of the biggest teams in college basketball throughout the course of the season. But they've also lost games to some of the best teams in college basketball along the way, too. And so while I think that it is a complete misrepresentation of this Alabama offense to say it's a offense that relies on three-point shots, that, oh, if they don't shoot well from three, they lose. I think that they have had troubles with that at times this season. And so you watch for that in this matchup as well. That leaves us with Duke and Wisconsin, and I am rolling with Duke to make it into the Final Four here. Again, they've got a depth of guys who are going to be potential NBA players, and so I think that they have just got a little bit more in the tank than a Wisconsin might have. So we move now into the Midwest region. Who will face Duke in the Final Four? We'll talk about that in the final segment here on Three True Values. Welcome back in. This is the final segment of this very special bracket breakdown edition of Three True Values. We have rolled through the South region, the West region, the East region. We now reach the bottom right corner of the bracket where Houston is the number one seed. They will play in Wichita against SIU Edwardsville, SIUE as they are abbreviated on most brackets. Houston should roll through that one pretty easily there. Then we get Gonzaga against Georgia in a fascinating matchup. We've got Gonzaga, whose computer numbers, the predictive metrics, say that they are one of the best teams in the country, but their strength of record does not necessarily indicate that. Georgia, who looked like they were on the right side and then the wrong side and then back on the right side of things, ends up as a 9 seed. This game, ultimately, I think Georgia's path to win is Asa Newell hitting another level in March. They need Asa Newell to go out there and be able to handle whatever Gonzaga throws at him, whether it's Graham Ike trying to get physical with him, whether it's Braden Huff trying to stretch him out on the other end of the floor. They're going to throw different looks at Asa Newell. I think that this game ultimately comes down to how he handles it. And that is why, since there are so many more options on the table for Gonzaga, that's why I'm leaning with them to advance here to the second round. We then look at one of the most fascinating 5-12 matchups, another one where I think most of the country is going to end up picking that 12 seed to advance. Maybe not over 50%, but it's going to be a large percentage. And that is Clemson against McNeese. And so let me tell you why McNeese has what it takes to get this done. First off, there's a familiarity there. It's going to be a interesting kind of storyline with Will Wade, who once was on staff with Clemson, returning. He's leading this McNeese team into a position where they have a lot at stake. First off, this is the last run, in all likelihood, for Will Wade at McNeese. His show cause, of course, has expired with the NCAA. He is now in line to take a job that has a little bit better resources, that has a little bit bigger brand recognition. We will see what job that ends up being. He's been mentioned, of course, in the running for plenty of these open jobs that have come across college basketball already as we lead into the first weekend of the NCAA tournament. So, with that said, we've got some history here. We've got something on the table for the coach. He's trying to show out, make that last impression before the hiring cycle starts to really kick off, once people start putting ink on paper. And if you look historically, many, many times, those mid-major coaches who are on the verge of signing an extension, or excuse me, of signing a new contract at a big school, getting that dream job, they very, very often pick up a win in the first weekend of the NCAA tournament. They very often delay the signing of that by a couple of days when they pick up a big win. We're looking across the bracket at Drake earlier and thinking the same thing here. Ben McCollum might be in the mix. Maybe he goes and picks up a big win before doing it. Same thing applies here to McNeese. I think that with that group, it is a really high-level group of basketball players. This is not a McNeese level of team. This is a team that has guys who could easily make the jump, those who have eligibility left, to the high major level and play a role on teams next season. And so for those reasons, I will just lean McNeese over Clemson here, although I do like this Clemson team. I think they're a good basketball team. I think they just come up against a really tough draw having to take on McNeese. We look now at Purdue taking on High Point. This is another one where you might want to at least circle it and think twice. I'm leaning Purdue just because they've got so much experience. You've got Braden Smith. You've got Trey Kaufman-Wren leading the way for that team. And I think guys who have been in the biggest spots before, guys who have put up huge numbers, who are so well-rounded in how they play the game, I'm going to lean with them more often than not. Although this High Point team has what it takes, they play an exciting brand of basketball. Alan Huss, of course, takes over as head coach and has had that thing rolling, has done an excellent job there of building that program into a team that we can talk about in this way, that we can discuss as a potential upset candidate in the NCAA tournament. As we now move to the bottom side of the bracket, we look at Milwaukee, where Illinois is taking on the winner of Texas and Xavier. We lean now into the first four matchup, that last first four matchup on Wednesday before making the pick. So Texas and Xavier. I think that Texas has had higher highs and much lower lows throughout the course of the season. Xavier got hot at the right time. They pieced together the resume, and despite not having the quad one success, was able to get into the field. So, which way do you lean? I think that I just give the edge to Texas based on one thing, and that's Trey Johnson. Trey Johnson, to me, is the type of player who has a huge NCAA tournament run. He is the type of player who goes and puts the team on his back in the biggest moment and figures it out. And so, in the absence of a clear lean towards one side or the other, because I do think, yes, Texas has had the higher highs. They've also had much lower lows. This Texas team has lost head-scratching games. They have looked completely lost on offense. Just no scheme, no rhythm to what they're doing at times. So if we go out there and Trey Johnson's not able to just put it together If he's not able to just carry this team, I would lean Xavier. But I have that much faith in Trey Johnson as a high-level basketball player to be able to put something together and continue his March run. So that leaves us with Texas and Illinois. And man, is this a hard one to choose, because both of these teams have had great highs and great lows. It's the same situation here. Both teams have blown out good teams. Both teams have been blown out by bad teams. And so what do we do with that? Early on, I leaned a little bit towards Texas being able to get that done. I think I'm probably leaning towards Illinois now. I think they're just a little bit deeper. I think I trust more guys on Illinois' team to have a decent matchup than on Texas. And so we look at Kentucky and Troy in the bottom part of that Milwaukee region, and I'm going to go with Kentucky. I know that they have struggled in early rounds, so in recent memory at least. And something that I think has gone a little bit under discussed is that Mark Pope still has something to prove in March. Mark Pope has not won a game in the NCAA tournament in his coaching career. And I promise you, if they lose this game, that will be brought up. But it's interesting to me that it's not on the radar at all. I haven't heard anyone discuss that fact leading into this matchup against Troy. Now, I'm not saying they should be worried. They are the better team. I've got them making a pretty deep run here, as we're going to find out. But you got to get that first one. And if you don't, the conversations start. It gets a little uncomfortable. So hopefully they're able to pull that one out. We go to Lexington, where UCLA and Utah State match up. I am going to roll with UCLA because while they have had struggles throughout the season, while they have been up and down, different results, Mick Cronin with a mixed bag of emotions after each game, what they have done is they've played well when they don't have a lot of travel to do. Now, you can talk about the moving time zones has been the issue, but I think it's been more of the travel aspect than simply which time zone they're in. And that's why I think getting to Lexington early, getting established there, getting a rhythm, I'm leaning towards picking UCLA. I think with the absence of a road trip the day before and having to adjust to time zones, whatever it is that Mick Cronin has been complaining about, clearly he feels like it's impacting his team. I know that it comes off as a lot of complaining, and a lot of it is complaining. But there's got to be some level of truth to it. I mean, he's got plenty of data points, and whether that's on him or on the league that he's playing in, it's a fact that they have not been good when traveling. So with the ability to get kind of established in Lexington, spend a couple of days there, I think that UCLA can win that one. And then Tennessee and Wofford, let's roll with Tennessee in the bottom of that bracket. So second round here, we've got Houston and Gonzaga. I lean Houston. I think this is the most dangerous spot for Houston, though, in the bracket until potentially the Final Four. I think this is the spot where you got to get through it. You can't have an injury. You can't have things go wrong, because they could easily go wrong here against the Gonzaga team that the predictive metrics say they could compete in this one. They could be right there with Houston. Excuse me. I'm going to go Houston, though. I think that this team might not be better, but the hope is they get a little better injury luck, because last year's team had everything it took to make a Final Four run. The injury, unfortunately, set them back over last year. So, McNeese and Purdue. I'll just lean Purdue here. We don't often see these Cinderella teams make deep cuts into the tournament. And I just lean on Braden Smith and Trey Kaufman-Wren being veteran guys, Matt Painter being in these spots before. I think they'll be able to survive that one. We then end up with Illinois against Kentucky. And I'm rolling with Kentucky because that Illinois team has been so inconsistent. I think that Kentucky, the key for them, and in that first round matchup too, but when they get into these deeper rounds, what is going to matter is health. Is Lamont Butler healthy? That is all that matters to me. Jackson Robinson, of course, is already out. Kirk Kriisa seems to be out long term. Is Lamont Butler healthy. He has been the key that has gotten this team going in the biggest moments. He's not maybe their most talented player. That might be Otega Owe, might be Amari Williams. But he is the anchor on the perimeter. He is the guy who is setting up the offense a lot of times. He brings so much to this team. I think he is vitally important to their ability to make a run through the NCAA tournament. And so we look at UCLA and Tennessee, and I'm going to go with the Vols here. I think they just have too much on the perimeter, especially for this UCLA team to keep up. I like the combination of Lanier and Ziegler to get through this one. Meshack can lock down whoever on UCLA's perimeter that they want to match him up with. And so we will go with the Volunteers there. So Houston and Purdue, and we'll roll through Houston. Like I said, I think the Gonzaga game might be a tougher matchup for them than this one. I think they match up very well with this Purdue team and should have no issues there. We then have Kentucky against Tennessee, an SEC rivalry, two teams that don't like each other too much, playing in Indianapolis. And I just lean Kentucky if they are not fully healthy, but if they are healthy to the point of where their health has been. With the addition of Lamont Butler, if he's still at 100%, I'd lean Kentucky there. I think that they could pull out the win in that one. And so then we end up with Houston and Kentucky, and I'm rolling with Houston to get the job done. Again, a solid matchup for them there. I think that they just are better across the board in that one. Setting up Duke and Houston in the Final Four. So who do we roll with there? I think this is one of the most fascinating matchups that we could possibly get deep into the tournament. You've got Houston, which is a little bit more veteran heavy. It's got plenty of production out there. Milos Uzan, of course, if they make it this far in the tournament, I think that it's a sign that Uzan has had a big tournament, that he has really hit his stride. And so how does that match up against Duke's guards? What is Cooper Flagg at 100%? Is Malik Brown able to return by this point? Because I think this is the portion of the schedule where they would really need him, where he starts to become even more important for them to advance through rounds. I am going to just lean Duke. I'm leaning with the star power here. I'm leaning with Cooper Flagg being just a different level of player, able to take over games when he's called upon. And I think at the point that he has rolled all the way to the Final Four, I think he has so much confidence. His team has so much confidence in him that he would be able to get them over that hump against Houston. So Florida against Duke. We have arrived at a national championship matchup, and it is about as close as you can call it. Florida and Duke. I think on Florida's side, you have the best team. I think you look at Walter Clayton, you look at Elijah Martin, Will Richard. We went through the list earlier. Alex Condon, all of those centers that they have that they can throw out at you. You look at Duke, who has the best player in Cooper Flagg and a great supporting cast. That is not to disparage Konkanippel, Common Malawak, Tyrese Proctor, even Sion James, Mason Gillis, Isaiah Evans, who has caught fire from the three-point line. How much can he stay on the floor? That's been big for them in recent weeks. I think that he could be an underrated piece of what takes them deep in the tournament if he can come in and knock down 3-4 three-pointers in each game. But I'm just going to lean Florida. I said it. They're a juggernaut right now. They are the best team in college basketball as of today. Of course, that does not mean that they are just unable to be beaten. Every team in this field has taken at least 3 losses over the course of the season. Nobody has been perfect. And so it is open here. It is open. I don't think it's wide open. I do think that the 1 seed teams are the only ones that I firmly believe can win it all. I think that plenty of the 2 seed teams could make a Final Four run, but I do not think that anyone but a 1 seed will ultimately lift the trophy this season. Thanks for tuning in here to 3 True Values. This has been a full NCAA tournament bracket breakdown. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you tune in on Thursday, where we will go through some more action, some more things you need to know about how we got to this bracket, about the bracket itself, what you should watch on the opening weekend of the NCAA tournament. It is the most exciting time of year. These 2 days, Thursday, Friday, and then of course into Saturday, Sunday, are some of the most fun sports viewing experiences you are going to get. So carve out some time, sit down, and watch college basketball for more than 12 hours uninterrupted. This is Three True Values. Thank you for tuning in throughout the season. Hope you continue to follow through March Madness. We will have plenty of content here for you. I'm your host, James Fletcher, and thanks once again for tuning in.